everybody. Tony Caldwell. We're having another episode of Uncaptive Agent this morning. And my guest today is Mandy Reed. Mandy is kind of unusual. She is a farmer's agent, and she's also an independent agency owner along with her husband, Josh. And they're in Cannon City, Colorado, which I learned this morning is in a unique environment in Colorado called the Banana Belt. Good morning, Mandy.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So tell me, the Banana Belt, does that mean that you don't get hail? There?
No, we still get hail. All of Colorado gets hail.
I was thinking, if you didn't get hail, every insurance agent in America wants to write business in your community.
Don't get that much snow, which is nice. It usually stays good temperatures, blue skies, and then we can drive to the mountains for snow, but we don't get so much of that here.
Well, I really appreciate you taking some time to visit this morning. You have a unique perspective in the insurance distribution industry because you're not only a captive insurance agent for farmers, but for reasons that I guess we'll talk about in a minute, you're also an independent agency. How did that all come about?
So I love being a farmer's agent and the brand, and being able to work with them has been phenomenal. There are certain instances where I'm sure all captive agents have realized that your carrier, for whatever reason, just doesn't have the appetite for a particular project. I live in a rural community, and so people here don't just do one job. Like in some of the cities, you may have somebody who owns a bar and a rafting company and a real estate office, and all these different pieces. Sometimes they're all in the same building, and so being able to have the flexibility when the company is unable to meet the appetite of a current client, to be able to work with them, and then when they say no, being able to go outside and still be able to service the client, I have found has been really awesome. Just because, for example, you can have the pieces, your home and auto, for example, with farmers, but then you've got this, an axe throwing bar down the road. Uh-huh. Obviously, a captive agency or a captive carrier isn't interested in an axe throwing bar, but it allows us to be able to retain all of the business with us, to be able to go out and find someone who is. Cool.
You mentioned axe throwing. My dad, long time ago, went to the World's Fair in New York City as a Boy Scout with an axe throwing act. He and three other Boy Scouts. I've got a photograph from the local newspaper, and he is in the paper, and he's throwing axes at another boy, surrounding him. Can you imagine that happening in 2022?
No, but I'm telling you, it still does.
Yeah. So anyway, the world's changed a bunch, but I guess maybe in Cannon City, some things are still the same. Actually, you're not that unusual to me. In our business, we've helped about 100 farmers agents make the transition to independent agent. And a bunch of those are actually just doing what you're doing, which is they still have a farmers agency and they have an independent agency that we've helped them start. So I'm familiar with those advantages, and I'm glad you shared them with the audience, though, because there may be people out there who, want to grow their business, and maybe you're stuck a little bit on the commercial line side, and you've just given them a great idea. So let me explore that just for a second with you, because you started the Reed Agency, which is your independent agency. You did that in 2017. Did you start the Farmers Agency at the same time, or did that predate the Reed Agency?
I did actually purchase the Farmers Agency at the same time, and the Reed Agency was born out of need. Understanding that carriers are used to a different building standard than there is in a rural community, different commercial standards than there are in a rural community. And what was happening is we absolutely could get, the financial products for a customer, their home, their auto, life insurance, those types of things. But then they were having to go to Denver, 2.5 hours away, to be able to get service for their business. And then eventually, of course, that company is always soliciting that person for everything else because the home and auto side was easy. And so being able to keep those clients in my book is how the Reed Agency was born, honestly. It was an act of desperation of how do we figure this out to be able to have somebody else not having their hands on the customers that I'm working so hard to take care of.
Yeah, this idea that somebody 2.5 hours away is reaching into your back pocket and picking money out of your back pocket by taking your clients away is interesting, and I want to talk about that for a minute. So, are you now doing the reverse? Are you picking the pockets of somebody 2 hours away from you, or are you just focused on your local community?
Oh no, I'm picking everyone's pockets who will let me.
Good. Yeah. We were just talking before we got started about, COVID. Uh, Fundamental change of any kind has, always there's negative things. And we focus a lot with COVID on the negative. Obviously, a lot of people have been sick, a lot of people passed away. There's all kinds of economic consequences that have been negative for many people, but it's also a huge new opportunity for people who are looking at it like that. And my view is that what we're doing today, having this conversation on Zoom, which now everybody can do, means that agents in Kansas City or anywhere else in the United States no longer have to be constrained by a geography. Geography's dead as a limit for agents in building their business. So how are you doing that? Because Kansas City, you said, it's a small community, it's a rural community. Obviously, there's more opportunity if you get further away. So how do you go about building your business long distance?
So, I mean, we have an amazing SEO company that helps with that, first of all. And so they target broader areas. So we do get a lot of business and people reaching out with specialties because the Reed Agency has some particular specialties such as tech and commercial real estate. Those have been things that just with keyword searches, thanks to the SEO company, have been able to kind of go out, statewide and beyond, even for some of those particular areas, specifically like historic buildings, just some of those types of things that are just kind of its own animal, if you will.
So you're using electronic marketing to bring people into you. Do you use a lot of content marketing, or are you just advertising on Facebook and specific geofencing? And tell me a little bit more about how you're doing that.
So because our area is small, word of mouth is big. We also have a large. This area is growing specifically in the tech sector. So they're calling it a rural reboot. And so we've got a lot of people that are coming in, remote workers and things, because of the area itself recreationally. And from that, we've been able to gain larger tech corporations that are in other areas just through word of mouth that way, and then being able to validate us with websites, social media searches, SEO, those pieces. So we have not had to go to great lengths on any like national marketing scale. As you know, in the SEO space, insurance is one of the most competitive. I could never afford to rank top of the line. It's just not possible. And so, being able to utilize the tools that we have and then the connections with the people who are moving in has really been key. And then I think just proximity. We have multiple offices, and one of them is in a co-working facility. It's a 40,000 square foot historic high school co-working facility. Where there's lots of entrepreneurs and tech people and tech businesses moving in. And so being able to just be there to advise them has really spread like wildfire too.
So, that's really interesting. I have a son who's worked literally in 4 or 5 different countries now using co-working spaces, and he likes it because of the interaction, the camaraderie. He's not alone and all that kind of stuff. And so, but I've not heard of anybody operating an agency inside a co-working facility like a WeWork before. So you're doing something unique, I think. How'd you come up with that idea?
Had a friend who bought the building, who started it up. And so we're fortunate. We actually have offices in there. We've got 3 offices in that space permanently alongside the co-working spaces. And so we're there all the time. Everyone who comes into the co-working walks right by our office and is able to say hello, good morning, ask questions, those things, and kind of go about it. So we get to see a lot of people who travel, who are doing a bunch of interesting different businesses. So it's really energizing.
So what's the growth in the book of business there been like compared to your basic business, your regular standalone insurance agency?
I mean, definitely faster. It's a little bit more elephant hunting on that one for sure, because, you can have nothing for months and then all of a sudden you're getting, a company that's in multiple states, different, just lots of employees. It's very different. I can't really compare it because, my farmer's book of business, it's very steady. It's a solid name. It's been around for a long time. They do a great job with marketing, but you're growing one household at a time. Whereas, in the commercial space, you may see absolutely nothing when all of a sudden you've got 17 policies on your desk that you're trying to figure out how to get everything taken care of at one time. Speed is the name of the game in the commercial space, I've learned, even more so than price, just trust and speed.
Gotcha. Okay. So, and you're a relatively new agency owner. You started your agency in 2017, so you just wrapped up 4, maybe 5 years in business. You had a lot of optimism and a lot of confidence in the future of smaller insurance agencies and their ability to, build businesses and have a bright future, or you wouldn't have done this, right? How do you look at that now? What do you think the next 3, 5 years or so in the agency business look like from your perspective?
You know, it would have been an easier question to answer prior to COVID, right? I feel like that has been, a wrench that has brought some good things, brought some bad things, some new challenges. I came from a commercial lending and business development banking financial side. That's what I did for 15 years in my previous life. And the relationship is always key in anything financial. And so I still believe that as the insurance industry changes, that relationship piece is still going to be crucial, especially in the commercial space. Small business owners are always going to be intricately involved in every aspect of their business. And asset protection, I don't think, is going to change in that way. So I think the challenge is going to be, how do we communicate that sincerity in all of these different mediums, whether it's Zoom or by phone or through social media channels, which are going through a lot of changes and things right now. You've got TikTok that's entered the space, which is something I swore I wouldn't be a part of, and yet I find myself there. We've got all of these different mediums. So I think the biggest challenge for me is going to be, how do I relate my sincerity and my compassion and care for my clients without always being able to sit across the table from them. So I think that's going to be, a big challenge, at least the next immediate years. As far as industry, right, I'm curious because, the industry is aging and changing, and there's going to be a lot of agents that are retiring. And so I think that, acquisition is going to be a huge piece to be able to scale in our world. And I think that people need to really just think outside the four walls of their agency and what the purpose is. For some people, they want to be able to be in their office and do their job every day. People like me, we want to scale and see how big can we get it, and how many people can be on our team, and how many people can we help and be involved in their businesses. And I think having a clear understanding of the direction that you're wanting to go is really crucial.
Okay. So you mentioned acquisition, and this is an interesting thing. The larger acquirers, the private equity firms, national brokerages, and the people, the infrastructure that support those folks from a buying, selling perspective, they view that there's about 4 years of inventory left. In other words, there's about 4 years at the current acquisition pace of larger agencies to acquire, and then these PE firms either have to move down the scale and start buying smaller agencies, or they've got a little bit of an issue. And so there's been a tremendous amount of that going on the last few years. But my observation is that there hasn't been nearly that level of activity at the smaller end of the scale, say sub $1 million of revenue agencies. At the same time, though, the about 50 to 70%, depending on which study you look at, in the independent agency world of employees, that's CSRs, producers, and owners, are going to be age eligible for retirement, i.e. 65, in the next 5 years or so. In fact, the average insurance agency owner is around 60 to 62 today. So obviously going to be a lot of transactions. You've got a unique perspective as a former banker, because a piece of this is the financial part, right?
Yeah.
So how are you thinking about that environment and that landscape and that opportunity from the standpoint of the Reed agency being an acquirer going forward?
Well, I mean, I've been a part of 7 acquisitions since I've been in the insurance industry, and each one of them is a little bit different. The lending aspect is truly probably the most complicated, because goodwill lending is not something that most bankers are familiar with, right? They want collateral, hard assets, those types of things. And so trying to make the pitch. And so many people are so quick to throw SBA out there, but with no understanding that a typical SBA application can be, close to 100 pages, and what they're really signing away. And so I have found that one of the biggest struggles is trying to find good quality lenders who understand goodwill lending and who are willing to, meet somewhere in the middle. Being able to throw, a few $100,000 as a down payment absolutely can be feasible. But when you're purchasing books, that are $10+ million and they're looking for, checks over, 1.5 million or more, all of a sudden we hit this level where a lot of the banks that are willing to do goodwill lending, they're like, whoa, $400,000 is our top. Like anything else, you got to come to the table with cash, which of course slows down your ability to acquire. So I think that's one thing that in our space is lacking for sure, is more lenders who understand what we're doing and being able to get the buy-in. A personal banker is obviously helpful in that case sometimes, but when you start talking about, going across the country or multiple states and things, you lose those connections. And so there's definitely an area of opportunity there for whether it's private investors or other lending institutions to get involved.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's a big gulf, and it's surprising that no one's really entering that marketplace. The average private equity investment firm is borrowing 90%, sometimes a tad more than that when they make an. I mean, it's surprising to people to learn that because they think private equity, that's all equity. Well, it's mostly borrowed money. But to your point, they're able to go into a more sophisticated lending environment and borrow money at much more favorable terms than the average entrepreneurial agent can, and so they're at a disadvantage. At the same time, though, as chairman of a community bank myself, I find that agents really don't understand how to build a solid relationship with a bank so that when they have an opportunity, they're ready for it.
Right.
Yeah, so you have some knowledge of that. What advice would you have for an agent that in the next 3 to 5 years wants to buy an agency? What does that agent need to do to get ready to have a great conversation with a banker or a private lender of some kind?
Well, I mean, I think any previous business experience is helpful just for confidence. I think that one of the things that business owners don't understand with banks is that the rules are different on the commercial side than they are on the private side. On the private side, there's all of these parameters and regulations that say, we can only judge you this way. We're going to only look at these things. This is all that matters to me, right? On the commercial side, you kind of get into the counting cows. All of a sudden, like, absolutely, credit matters. Of course, that's 101. But, longevity of being able to, having run another business, or if you haven't, do you have a business plan? Are you anticipating the questions prior to sitting in, the banker's office? And then also being able to see, like, are you walking in for the first time, never having been a customer, never having done anything, and saying, hi, my name is Mandy Reed, and I would like, $750,000 on goodwill unsecured lending. And they're going to laugh you right out of your office. And so I think being able to truly have those relationships and being able to show that you have a plan, that you're good with your money, that you've got a growth plan in there. Experience obviously is important, but I think that really having those relationships at a community bank, I think community banks are the way to go. That's my preference. It does get hard because sometimes they can't help you with everything, but it's still a solid place to start, to be able to build those relationships. So if they can't, they usually can point you, in the right direction. But everybody should have a lender that they know on a first name basis if you're in business. I really believe that.
So that is such great advice. And, you listed a whole bunch of things I want to come back to in a second, but you ended really with relationship and really preparation. And I remember back many, many years ago when I knew someday I was going to want to borrow some money. And I did exactly what you're talking about. I mean, I went in and I met a banker, and we'd go to lunch every 4 or 5 months. And I eventually realized that in the back of his mind, he was like, when are you going to borrow some money from me? Now sitting on the banking side of this, we have these salespeople in the bank. We call them loan officers. And really, their job is to make loans, and they get paid and bonused and compensated for driving revenue, just like an insurance agent. So, they love to loan money. That's why they're there. right?
People, I think, don't realize that. I feel like people almost think like they're asking for a favor. Having been on the sales and lending side, like I know, like there's some competitions going on in those rooms when you're sitting in loan committee and you're saying, all right, well, I got this one and I got that one, and you're going around. I mean, the desire for you to succeed is high, but they got to know that you're going to be able to do it. And the relationship part is key. I mean, your lender does have to have, a vote of good faith in you and in your success, because their name is written on the bottom of the same loan packet that your name is on. And so if you fail and they're having to collect, that's a ding on them as well. And so that confidence piece is key.
Yeah. So you started your list with credit and you just finished back up with credit. And, I see a lot of people who want to get into the insurance business. A lot of people, on the captive side of the business want to become independent insurance agents. And yet they have terrible credit. I mean, 600, 700 credit scores, unpaid bills, all kinds of things, car payments they didn't make on time. And, banks look at that, and that just is like like Monopoly. Don't pass go directly to jail, right? So, so if you're going to buy an agency down the road and you think you want to borrow some money to do that, obviously take care of paying your bills on time, right? Don't have a really good credit score, because that's the very first thing any lender is going to do, right? Is pull your credit, and
Absolutely.
it's a go straight to jail if you have a 600 credit score.
Absolutely.
And then you talked about experience. Obviously, if you own an agency today and you want to buy one in the future, you're building that experience and having a business plan. I would say 75 to 90% of agencies with revenues under $1 million do not have an annual business plan, much less a 3-year or 5-year business plan.
Does that blow your mind?
Does. It does. And I also tell people, though, if you can't put your business plan for the next year on one sheet of paper, it's too unwieldy, right? So, I mean, it's great to have a lot of background, but knowing what you're going to do and having a plan for it's critical. And that's what the banker wants to know, because the banker believes, hey, if you have a plan and you're paying attention to it month by month, quarter by quarter, year by year, this is a stupid, easy business to make money in.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. I think that, for people understanding, what a pro forma is and being able to do those pieces alongside their business plan, understanding the difference between, your North Star, your business plan, and then your strategic plan, which sure, if you need to make that longer, break it down into chunks, but banker doesn't care. Banker wants to know what your growth projection is. They want to know honestly what you're thinking may drop off when you acquire, because of course there's always going to be some attrition in any type of transition. And so, don't sugarcoat those things, but being able to explain, like, what's your plan? If you're expecting that you're maybe going to lose, 10% to attrition, like, how are you going to be aiming for, 20 or 30% growth in the next year to be able to recover that and then still move forward? And the other thing that I feel like lenders they like to know that you're going to do this again. Like, if this is successful, you're going to come back. And so I feel like, again, that relationship piece, being able to stay in touch with them is super helpful as well.
So just a couple of quick additions to your absolutely awesome list and advice for folks is, again, back to my experience with the banker kind of wanting to know when I was ever going to borrow some money, get a line of credit. Doesn't have to be a big line of credit, $50,000, maybe it's $100,000. Agencies have an ebb and flow of income. Some months are bigger than others. Well, when you have that can be a tool from a cash management standpoint for the agency owner. Hey, I had a great month this month. I'm going to pay off my line of credit. Next month's a tough month. I can draw against it and use that to help you with your working capital. And at the same time you're doing that, you're proving to that banker that you're a responsible borrower, right?
Absolutely.
And so that's a great place to start with a bank from a business loan perspective. The one thing to remember, and you know this, revolving lines of credit are supposed to revolve. So when you take that loan out, you got to pay it back. I mean, you can't just pay interest on it, which some people find out the hard way, is something you're supposed to do. The other is just make the relationship. And, the other thing, you didn't mention this, but having a great relationship with a banker often leads to a lot of business, because that banker needs to make sure that stuff's insured right.
Correct. And so there's always those referral opportunities there. And I guess the other thing that I'd like to just mention for anyone who's listening is people need to understand that business finances and personal finances are very different. you don't Dave Ramsey your business. You don't do those types of things. It's about leverage. It's about cash flow. It's about those types of investments, and that you can't, in my opinion, scale at a zero debt portion. You need to be able to say, okay, we're going to leverage this. We are going to use this one to be able to buy this, and then we're going to be able to, get this loan for this point in time. And as you're doing that, you're continuing to build net worth, but you're also, you're building that credit. You're building your Dun & Bradstreet score. You're doing all of those things as you're utilizing credit. And so credit in business isn't a bad thing. And I think that's something that new business owners especially need to understand, that it's not wrong to buy an agency and get a loan for it. You don't need to wait until you're 60, until you've saved all of your pennies to be able to buy an agency. That a strong book of business can absolutely take care of its own debt.
Man, this is just a great conversation. I hope people are listening, because you're giving really pearls of wisdom that a lot of small business owners just don't think about. I have a son who's finishing up his master's of business administration at a fairly good university, and I have another son on Wall Street that is in investment banking. Would say both of them the same thing. In fact, my son I was talking to at Christmas just recently said, most businesses don't borrow enough money, and that every business should borrow money based on their cost of capital. And so I'm guessing that the average insurance agency out there has no idea what their cost of equity is versus their cost of borrowing. But in almost every business's case, the cost of borrowing is cheaper than their cost of equity. And when you realize that, you go, okay, I need to borrow more money because it's actually financially efficient, in terms of growing, and you said growing wealth. And so, there's different ratios about how you should do that. But if you're listening and you're kind of curious about this topic, I'd encourage you just to Google, cost of equity, cost of capital, and then begin to ask yourself, instead of, maybe going out and spending $50,000 from your profit sharing this year on new furniture, fixtures, and equipment for the office, new computers or whatever, does it make sense to borrow that money?
Absolutely. So it's a different mindset. And I would say, I guess, the people who have bad credit, I would just caution even being in this industry, because people are coming to you for sound financial advice, and a good indication as to whether you're going to be able to get it is how you manage your own. So definitely something I think to kind of keep in the back of our mind.
Well, let's shift just a second and talk. I think earlier you said that you've done 7 acquisitions. I've been part of 7 acquisitions. So books of business or agencies or something like that. So what's your best thinking around how you're going to find books of business and agencies to acquire over the next 5 years or so, let's say, and what are you doing about that now, other than getting ready financially? I mean, how are you going about finding them and nurturing those relationships? What are your secrets to success for people that don't live in, your part of Colorado?
Well, being able to, Agency Equity is a good website to be able to look on there. They don't have everything, but you get at least a little idea of what's out there and what states and who's looking for what. I think also just being part of different social media outlets, whether it's, groups on Facebook or, following different insurance, podcasts or things like that, because you'll be surprised when people share that information. It just kind of comes out organically on some of those platforms, and then being able to just have conversations, with those agents and finding out, what are you looking to do and when are you looking to do it? And even just knowing other insurance agents that are maybe starting to get close to that retirement age, and just saying, hey, when you're ready, I'm here. Let me know what you're thinking, and starting those conversations early on before they're ready to go. Because one thing I have learned through those acquisitions is when an agent has had enough, an agency owner has had enough, you're tired, you're done. You don't, it's hard to grow when you want to be done. And shrinking agencies lose value. And so there's definitely mutual benefits to, speed and having that connection made prior to the agency owner being ready to go ahead and leave, because it is an exhausting process for sure. It's not something that's quick. I think that it's reasonable to say that, probably 6 months is reasonable to be able to get from start to finish on an acquisition, which is very different than most, real estate deals and commercial lending spaces. And so that relationship is also really important too. So, don't go in with the idea that you're going to buy a book and that you're not buying a relationship with the previous agency owner, because they can make or break you. Those customers were there first. And so you want to make sure that you've got that relationship solid as well.
That's really some good advice. And, just in the last 12 months, I've seen agencies sell for actually in one case, one times revenue, 1.5 times revenue, but some selling for 5.5 to 6 times revenue. But the agencies that tended to sell at the lower end of the scale tended to have what the tired owner, and it hadn't been growing. Maybe it had been shrinking for a while. And so it is worth thinking about, if you are in that range of time within, say, 10 years of retiring, thinking about the optimal time for your exit while your agency is still growing, or at least maintaining, because you're possibly going to double, even triple what you get out of the agency by not selling it too late. I mean, I think a lot of times people are like, okay, I want to keep the cash flow or whatever for another year or two. But in doing that, they really reduce, their retirement nest egg.
Absolutely.
And you're seeing that as an acquirer as well, I'm sure. So good things to think about both from the selling and the buying side. The other thing that's interesting, we're getting ready to go just in the next few months into a little higher rate interest environment. I mean, obviously we have inflation right now, and the Federal Reserve has indicated at least 3 times, maybe 4 in the next year, they're going to raise rates up a couple percentage points. That's a gigantic change compared to the last decade, maybe decade and a half. Again, putting your old banker hat back on, but also as an insurance agent, how do you anticipate that impacting your business in the next year or 2 years?
I mean, it's definitely going to, because those pieces, the interest rates usually on these unsecured goodwill loans are already on the higher end of the spectrum, just because there's not that hard collateral. So I definitely seeing it being something that, we need to calculate and be mindful of. But I think it would be to our detriment to focus so hard on that we're unwilling to move. I feel like that we need to be still nimble and able to go ahead and say, yes, this is the interest rate environment, but this is where the book is right now. It's still generating. It's still a healthy book. I mean, insurance, we are so fortunate to be in this industry during COVID, and we were so fortunate. So many people were not able to meet their obligations and do what they need to do. But by golly, people need us and they trust us, and we were able to show up during these times. And so I think that it would be, foolish to get scared too much by these interest rates into not moving. But definitely, I think there's probably some wisdom into having some, availability for lending now, whether it's, a line of credit or things like that now, to be able to move quickly. There's probably some wisdom in those things. If you do have hard assets and you're looking at acquiring, maybe you go ahead and, pull some cash out of those, whether it's a real estate venture or things like that, pulling that out now. So you've got the money to be able to acquire, and you're locked into a current interest rate is probably wise also.
So in terms of thinking about that, but also just in building the business over the next couple of years, a couple of things. We haven't been in this kind of environment a long time, so people aren't used to thinking about it. But a couple of things are going to change. First of all, insurance companies have been insisting on sub 100% loss ratios, combined loss ratios, for the last 15 years or so, because they couldn't make the money necessary for long tail exposures like workers' comp, general liability, auto liability, and so forth. So I think one of the things you can look forward to is a bit of a loosening, and maybe some companies will return to cash flow underwriting. I hope they don't do that, because that's just guaranteed problems for agents as well as the companies. But there's going to be some changing around underwriting over the next couple of years as that changes. I think just watch and see if that doesn't happen. Another thing that is going to affect our business, and really in a positive way, in the next couple of years, is inflation has driven the cost of replacing assets, cars specifically, and houses, and as well as commercial buildings. It's driven those prices up. The average used car is up 39% year over year. Construction costs have varied from 25 to 40%, but they're not coming all the way back down. So $1 million building is going to cost more than $1 million to replace. So a couple of things agents have to think about. One is they need to be raising the values that they're insuring for, or they're going to get caught in an E&O situation, or maybe lose the business to another agent who comes by and says, hey, they're not doing their job. That's the first thing. Second thing, though, is you're going to get big commission increases. And so it's actually a great time to look at an acquisition because you're going to be buying on historical performance, but looking at better than historical revenue over the next several years based on the inflation we've had, right?
Absolutely.
Yep. So just some things for folks to think about, just operationally as well as if you're selling or buying. So it's a great time to buy because likely interest rates will go up. That might push your cost of borrowing up, might push the value of the agency down a bit. But what's going to tend to balance against that is the fact that agencies are going to be collecting more commissions.
Right. Absolutely.
So it's a great time to start an agency. It's a great time to buy an agency, and it's a really good time to sell one. That doesn't happen very often. I mean, it's an interesting confluence of great opportunity, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's times that we've never seen before, and hopefully we'll never see again. This has been a little bit crazy in the past couple of years, but definitely a lot of opportunities if we're looking in the right places and working together.
Well, so you're obviously excited and enthusiastic about your future, and you've got a big crew of people that you've managed to recruit. I think you have 13 producers, I think, if that's not right.
Yep,
So
that's right.
you're obviously able to share with folks that are not in our business why they ought to get in the business. And I think that's a great optimistic note on which we ought to end our conversation today. So just give me the two or three or four things that you tell people as you're recruiting them about why they ought to be in this business.
Well, one is, finding the right people who care about other people. I mean, that's really key. So finding those relationship builders, finding those people who are already maybe doing another industry but caring for people, and letting them know that, your compassion for people pays you in this industry, which is pretty cool. Lots of places that's not the case. And so being able to just share like, hey, there's this opportunity and you can still care for people and take care of people. Being able to have the financial freedom that this industry allows us to have, the flexibility that this industry allows us to have, whether it's working remote or working in an office or, taking people out to lunch. There's really a place for every style of business in insurance, which I think is really unique. There's people who are really great at social media and connecting on there, and there's other people who want to take every client to lunch. And you can do all of those things in insurance. And so really, I think just being able to get them hooked that you can make a difference. It's a profitable industry. You can make a difference for your families, and then being able to have some work-life balance. I don't know. I'm like, you can't do a podcast with me on work-life balance because I'm a workaholic, but some people are able to have work-life balance in this industry, and the ability to be able to earn residual income and scale. You can be as big or as small as you want to be. And I just think that that's really the opportunity that insurance offers.
Well, that's great. And I would just caution those of you who are thinking about, okay, I can get in business to take people to lunch. I mean, my first year in the business, I had lunch 3 times a day because I could always get somebody to go with me, a prospect at lunch, gained 45 pounds. So you do have to be careful. I had a great sales year, but I had to really work at losing a bunch of weight. So anyway, Mandy, thank you for being with me today. I've really enjoyed our conversation. How does someone get a hold of you if they want to learn more about either your agency, your plans, or just wanted to visit with you?
Sure. We've got a website. It's www.thereedagency.net. And all of our information is on there, and you can reach out anyway that way, or you can email me at mandy@thereedagency.net.
Great. Well, thank you, Mandy Reed. I've really enjoyed it. I'm talking to independent agency owners about this all the time. If you'd like to have a more personalized conversation, click on the button or the link in the description, and we'll make that happen. You can also reach out to me at tonycaldwell.net/contact.